Hi, everybody. I'm Rudyard Lynch, and we're currently on the fourth episode of Common Ground. This is just going to be an episode where Dave and I talk about our backgrounds, and it's a way to learn more about us as hosts. So, no guest today. We'll just share a little bit about our lives. And I'm happy to bring on Dave as my co host.
Great to be here. Rudyard, I'm really enjoying this. We've had three great episodes so far. I do think it's valuable for people to understand your perspective, my perspective, where we come from, why we do this, what they can expect in the future, and maybe share a few insights or thoughts that we have right now. You and I have lots and lots of interesting conversations, right? And I imagine a lot of people wonder why is a 21-year-old hanging around with a 61-year-old who, have these common interests, et cetera, and what the motivation is for the show. I don't know that a lot of people actually know that much about you, even though they're big fans of What If Alt Hist. They probably don't know that much about your upbringing, et cetera, what motivated you, et cetera, some of your you as a person. So I thought it might be good for you to share a little bit about whatever you'd like to about your background and what your motivation was for starting What If Alt History and what your motivation is for Common Ground.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable where I've been doing this show for close to 9 years, and there was a 1 or so year period where the videos were me talking in front of a camera, and the fans didn't like that. And so most of my videos are just me talking as a voiceover, and no one sees my face. I'll have my face occasionally for advertisements, but a lot of What If Altist fans don't know my name. They don't know what I look at. Whenever I put my face out, they'll say face reveal, where as if I haven't showed my face, but I've had my face out for 3 years. So I am currently 21 years old. I'm from outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I'm currently in Los Angeles, but I'm moving to Texas in a month, where Dave currently is. And I started What If Altist on my 13th birthday, and it was largely out of boredom. And I was really into the alternate history community, which it's funny a lot of you might not know what that is, even though it's what I did on the show for 7 years. And it's like, what if the South won the Civil War? What if the Nazis won World War II? And a lot of the stuff in the alternate history community wasn't very good. And I thought I could do a better job. And so I started the show, and it was a hobby. And I did it for 7 years. And for the first 6 of those years, I got 500 subscribers. So I had no expectation of success. I just kind of kept doing it. And even after the fourth or fifth year, I hadn't hit 100 subscribers. And when COVID hit, I got to backpedal and tell more of my life story. But when COVID hit, I decided I'm going to grind on this really hard because I was in a gap year between high school and college. And I was not optimistic about my future with college. I thought that if my track continued, I'd end up doing a job I really didn't like because I could see the way America was going economically. So I grinded really hard on my YouTube channel during COVID, and I switched from doing alternate history to doing the content we currently do, like geopolitics, like history, um, philosophy, anthropology. And when I started that, I was at 88K subscribers. And for the little bit more than 2 years I've been doing that, we've gone from 88,000 subscribers to over 500,000 subscribers. Um, and it's just wild. I do this as a full-time job. I have a team behind me, and I'm really happy to be doing YouTube full time.
Well, it's an interesting study. I mean, here's somebody who kept grinding, which is a life principle, right? Tenacity is clearly a life skill, a talent that not everybody has, and so there's merit just in that. And then opportunity, the timing had to be right. And then you were willing to adapt. So you adapted and changed things up and found what people were interested in, but still something that you had passion about. I mean, that's how I connected with you. I came across your content, thought it was really interesting. I mean, I'm really good at tracking people down. I can find people. That's one of my skill
I
sets.
literally
And
have my email attached to my YouTube show. Like if you go to YouTube, click about or
yeah,
connect, and that's my email.
well, it's sort of a corporate one. It's the What If Alt Hist one, right?
Yeah.
But no direct email, et cetera. So I reached out to you, and I think maybe Merrick, your producer, et cetera, connected and said, "Hey, I think you're really brilliant." Um, and I'm come from a more older establishment sort of situation, at least in my life now. And a lot of the principles, philosophies, assessments that you come up with, I think apply to life today or to America today. And I think some old fogies like us need to, like me, need to utilize this sort of thinking, this sort of step back, global view of America with regard to us and our position as a society, our evolution, our stage that we're at, and try to make sure that we don't necessarily replicate all of the mistakes that every other, all societies seem to do. These are universal things that you've seen, patterns, et cetera, that you talk about, and I think people would be wise. And so, one of my motivations, one of my goals, is for the people who don't know about Rudyard Lynch, especially those who are in geopolitics, in power, national security, defense. These are things areas that I'm involved in. They need to understand these principles, et cetera, and apply them. Right. And one of the things that I think you're particularly good at is stepping back and not becoming emotionally attached to an assessment. When you're critical of United States or any other society, you do it with this sort of dispassion. It's not even a cold, hard clinical one, but it's a clinical um, assessment, an honest, a ruthlessly honest assessment of countries and peoples and societies and norms and beliefs, et cetera. And you're able to do that in a way that doesn't become political, which I think is really important, and you're not denigrating anyone. You're not being judgmental about anyone. And that's refreshing. And I don't see that very often. So that's what attracted me to your videos, et cetera. So I'm honored to be doing this with you. It's been great to get to know you. I think you're a fascinating young guy, and I think there are a lot of fascinating, bright people out there. I wish more and more of them had a vehicle like you do. And I want more people to understand who you are. And I think it's good that you're showing your face. And I think you've got a bright future. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that you're going to be doing that people should be on the lookout. So I can't tell you all of Rudyard's secrets now, folks, but be on the lookout for some interesting developments that are coming and things that you might want to be part of.
Um,
If it's all right, Yodard, I thought I'd tell some people about myself a little bit and why I give a damn about this and where I come from and why it's germane, and maybe why people want to tune in the future. So, I am the son of a army officer. Every male in my family back to Alexander Hamilton served. My brother and I are the only two who didn't. So, because of my father's experience in Vietnam, where he served over 3 tours, didn't come back well, and I haven't talked to him since I was 18 years old. We broke the cycle, right? So I didn't serve in the military, and I do believe that if you didn't serve, you probably ought to do something for those who did, right? And you can hate war and you can hate the game, but don't hate the player, right? We need to value those people who are willing to put themselves in harm's way. And for those reasons, it fills a little hole in my soul, if you will, to do something for our veterans. So about 13 years ago, I started a speaker series in a think tank, and it was focused on issues related to U.S. global competitiveness, national security, and things like that. We've used it to raise money and awareness for worthy causes. And so we've raised a little over $7 million for different charities that benefit our veterans and their families. And we've just tried to bring people together, people smarter than me, talking about issues impacting, the future of America. And I've been honored to, originally connect and be supported by people like T. Boone Pickens and Ross Perot Sr., um, Randall Stevenson of AT&T, Herb Kelleher. So these guys, they wanted to have a forum for civil discourse on issues, nuanced conversations, right? Which you used to be able to have back in the day. You could have respectful disagreements that didn't end in bloodshed and being canceled and being called all sorts of names, et cetera. Right? It's interesting because I come from in my background politically, I grew up being significantly left of center. My father was very, very right wing, um, and I grew up the opposite, and very active in the civil rights movement. Always been a sort of a community organizer. Wrote on the subject, rabble rouser type stuff, college, et cetera. Very anti-authoritarian, which might be surprising for people to look at me and what I'm doing now, but um, I consider myself a classic liberal. in the classic sort of almost Bill Maher-esque sense, right? And I have seen over the past few years this schism happen, and a significant change in the last landscape, a significant change in the Overton window, shifting, to my mind, significantly left, and an inability for us to be able to get along and work together as a nation. And there's almost a civil war, a cultural civil war going on. We no longer have what people would call a cultural war. We have a reality war. The lens through which the world sees Americans see America and almost any issue is so skewed that it's like we're looking at two completely different realities, right? So with my background, et cetera, and the speaker series we run, it's called America's Future Series. One of my single biggest worries is that my two sons, I've got a 19-year-old and a 24-year-old, and I would like them to live in a world in America somewhat akin to what I enjoyed, even though we grew up really poor, briefly homeless, did some migrant farm working, this kind of stuff. Grew up, I boxed to help put myself through high school and college and this kind of stuff, uphill and down, was it uphill both ways to get to school in the snow, did all of that. Even so, you know, there's always been a great opportunity for, the idea of the American dream and opportunity, upward mobility, social mobility has always been really um, prevalent, and I experienced it. And I'm worried that America will no longer be the strongest military, political, and economic power in the world. And it's because we're doing the work of our enemies. We are tearing each other apart. And we're not providing an opportunity for young, smart, brilliant guys like you, unless you're on YouTube, right? Fortunate enough, smart enough, and driven enough to be on YouTube, to have a piece of quote unquote the American dream. So we've got to come back to some sort of sense of reasonableness and reality. I, as as someone who's pointed out all of the flaws of this country for a long time, I used to write a column called a column called "Our Nation on Issues of Color" with a rather militant black activist, and I was connected with the Nation of Islam back in the day. Knew Percy Sutton, who was Malcolm X's attorney and mentor, got him to come to Texas and speak. Um, even someone like myself, who comes from that sort of background, thinks it's gone too far, that the pendulum has swung so far in this sort of anti-American sentiment that I now find myself like a Bill Maher and others going, wait, stop, let's calm down here for a second. Um, you can have your opinion, but you can't have your own facts. You know, America is a nation. It's imperfect, and I am way happy to talk about all of its imperfections, but I'm not willing to throw it out with the bathwater entirely, right? Okay. So that's my motivation for doing this thing. And this is why I want to bring people on where we can find common ground, whether you're 61 or 21, whether you're left, right, center, whether you call yourself a pink, you know, unicorn. I don't care what you call yourself. All I care about is policies. And we have to come to a position where we can agree on certain core tenets and policies so that our country provides young men and women like you a, a promising, attractive future. And I'm really thrilled to be on this with you. You've shared some really interesting insights. I think the thing with Orson Scott Card, which is about to come out, people will have seen by the time they see this one, will be brilliant. And I thought you might share, if you will, some of the people that you have in mind and the kind of topics that you want to that people would see if they continue to tune in. What kind of topics that we're going to be covering, and some of the people you envision bringing on.
David and I are have Dave and I have been good friends and have become so recently, and I've appeared on his two of his programs, including his latest summit uh, for the military. And although we're very different in age, there are a lot of similarities between us, and we're both kind of super connectors for people in our category, where like we've compared lists of people we know we could bring on the show, and for both of us, it's incredibly large. And the next guest I'm going to bring on after this is Sam Oberja, who's a friend of mine who runs Bismarck Analysis, which is a large geopolitical consulting firm. And um, I've literally have a list of 60 people that I'd love to
Yes,
bring
I've
on.
got the list. It's an impressive list. So tune in. There's some great folks coming.
Um, And I don't want to spoil beyond that. I'd like to bring on. I'm also going to bring on Philippe Fabry, who is a great French historian who does a lot of similar stuff to What If Altist. Um, and it's sad where Dave and I have very. We both have large networks, but they don't connect at all. And that's the scary thing, where stuff like this is incredibly important because the degree of discourse in our society today is horrifically low. Where I've had this conversation a couple times over the last couple of days. The biggest problem in our current society is aging. Aging will kill a significant amount of the world's pop. It'll kill entire parts of the world, like China, Canada, Japan, Europe, Russia, etc. But no one mentions how to deal with aging. It's completely out of mind for basically anyone, or no one talks about the rise of external threats like China. And I just finished a book that's really good called The Master and His Emissary, which is about the two parts of the brain. And the author makes the argument that the left brain is the one that rules the world today. And because of that, the left brain's incapable of thinking outside of its chain of logic. And so in the modern world, we establish a chain of logic. We never check if it's accurate, and then we whistle as we walk off the cliff. And it's important to connect the different parts of society that Dave and I know because they kind of need each other. Where the old established people need younger people to replace them, and the younger people need to be heard at some point. And if we don't have these conversations now, our society is just screwed because there's the the conversations we're having now are woke people on one side who have a completely religious, insane view of the world. And the biggest people going against them are people like Andrew Tate or Sneeko, where I'm not going to blanketly denounce them, but neither of them are the philosophers a society needs to establish some kind of coherent understanding of what it should do.
So I want to unpack about 4 or 5 of these things because they're all really, really important. So just first with ageism, aging out, we have uh, demographics where a large percentage are becoming older and older, which cause a certain burden in terms of being able to for those people to retire, the costs, et cetera. You need young, energetic people, workers, to produce economically, and anytime that pyramid gets sort of V-shaped, you have a problem, right? And we have that, and a lot of the world has that. So I get that. Um, then secondly, this issue around how different societies, parts of societies view the world, and how they've sort of fragmented, become bifurcated. Um, this only happens in societies, and you've studied these a lot, where you reach a certain level of affluence. You might call it affluenza, and you have the largesse, you have the luxury of staring at your own navel, picking yourselves apart, and coming up with crazy ass ideas, because you're not dealing with any sort of real external, existential threat, and you don't have to focus on things like producing, creating, developing,
Yeah.
executing, right? And everything is about being part of the cool kids club, right? Everyone's focused on how do I stay within position of power, like inside the court and in a royal court,
Right.
right? That seems to be where we're at. Those societies all die in part because they have age, because of age problems, and also because of this sort of internal decadence, this natural decadence cycle that you've talked about in some of your
Yes.
videos, and everyone should watch your decadence video.
Thank you.
Um,
Ugh.
uh,
Um,
so in terms of where we go next, I think we have to be able to have nuanced conversations, respectful ones where people disagree on particular topics. You ought to be able to have a conversation about what is the best policy for immigration, what is the best policy for trade, what is the best policy for defense spending or whatever as a percent of GDP. Should the United States be the policeman to the world or not? Should we be? Can we have a conversation about Ukraine where I can don't have to just say Slava Ukraine all the time, and I'm a big Ukrainian supporter. And I can also say, but hey, man, we're spending a whole lot of money, and we're on the cusp of World War III. Maybe we should have a nuanced conversation about that. We have to be able to have those, and I don't think any of us feel comfortable doing that. We're afraid if we misspeak, the thought police will come get us, right? We'll be labeled this or that, right? We had a podcast one time, you and I, with someone, and the person um, was critical of you because you said there were pluses and minuses to immigration because you weren't 100% in favor of every aspect of immigration. He made it out as if you were A, anti-immigration, and B, that you in fact might in some form be somewhat racist, which was completely unfair. I got excited about it. I didn't like him saying that, et cetera, right? We can't do that to each other anymore. And no one that gets brought onto this program will be treated that way. I've made a solemn vow to you about that, right?
Thank you.
Um, Rudyard is one of the most fair-minded, um, you know, unracist, non-racist, whatever. And I also don't agree with Rudyard when he says that he's center right. I don't think he's center right. I think you're smack down center, but you may find that as an insult. But I think you're straight down the middle, a centrist, and that's what I think I've become. But who
It's
knows?
not right or
At the end
left
of
anymore. It's woke, anti-woke. And
it's and I even like to use the term hyper woke. I used that the other day because there's some good aspects of wokeness, but most things can be taken to their illogical extreme and can be bastardized and corrupted. And BLM got corrupted. It just did. It became a Marxist organization. It had a good purpose, et cetera, and initially, and it went straight off the rails. Right,
yeah,
the woke movement has gone off the rails. Um, some to the point where there are the Andrew Tate equivalents on the left, right? I would say that Mulvaney is sort of the is sort of the Andrew Tate of of the woke world, right? Of
yeah,
the trans world, because I would have been thrilled with RuPaul as a spokesperson for Bud Light. I think a lot of people would have been fine with RuPaul. Mulvaney is actually a misogynist who
yes.
makes fun of and is a trope. He's the Jerry Lewis of of the trans movement. It's incredibly disrespectful. He's every caricature and every trope that you can imagine, right?
I love your
There were a
description.
dozen other options that could have been chosen, but they chose him. And so for every Andrew Tate, there is an equivalent on the other side, right? And because we love train wrecks, we can't have a normal, reasonable, in the middle, even eccentric. I mean, I love my eccentrics. I mean, I love eccentric, different. I love quirky, different people, right? They don't. Not everybody has to be cis for me, all right? Um, but we pick the wrong ones, and it's because they're the most contrarian. They're the most extreme because they get the biggest emotional response,
Yeah.
and that's not healthy.
I find it funny you refer to Dylan Mulvaney as the anti-Andrew Tate because
Now, he's the
it's
Andrew Tate of his movement.
no, it's also a horrifying comparison because Tate is he's wealthy through his own merit. He is like a world champion kickboxer.
Yeah, and
Encourages young men to work out and have a life. And
yeah, you're not going to hear me argue with Andrew Tate
Dylan
about all of
Mulvaney
those good
done.
missions, but I'm curious about being considered an extremist and sort of a
No, but what is Dylan
polarizing.
in that comparison? What has Dylan Mulvaney done? What has he actually accomplished? And it's
He's been famous for
remarkable.
being he's famous for being famous, which is sort of a Kardashian-esque thing,
Yes,
right? Being you're famous because you're famous and because you're known, et cetera, which is not accomplishing anything, but mostly it's for being a caricature. And the only part that equivalates for me is they're not. It's not a great comparison. I get that they're not a great comparison, right? But the notion of being a caricature of Tate being this alpha, 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 guy,
well said.
and and Mulvaney being an anime version of a woman. I don't know what I don't know what that is, right? I
Yeah,
swear to God, if RuPaul was selling Bud Light, I'd be all for it, and I'd be buying Bud Light if that influenced me, right? If spokespeople influenced me, right? But RuPaul is a respectful person who is just who he is in his own right, right? He doesn't actually make fun, and RuPaul doesn't make fun of women.
it's
So
yeah. Um, I keep on thinking the book I finished last night, The Master and His Emissary. And one of the points the book makes is that we are the most cynical and the most gullible society in history, where there are loads of things where you just need to call someone's bluff. Where I used to love listening to pop music. I can't stand any of the pop music now because it's all garbage. You listen to the lyrics. The lyrics don't make sense. They're literally idiotic. Like a 5-year-old could have written them, except they're extremely lewd. And nothing in our culture works except consumer appliances. Our music's terrible. Our TV's terrible. Our politics don't work. Our academia and intelligentsia has been hijacked by extremists. The only thing that works is that when you buy a, as one of my friends said earlier today, when you buy a car, you know it's going to drive. And what we do is
So,
we
I mean,
substitute. We
so I'm
sub.
not one of those people. I'm not one of those people that thinks the good old days were all perfect. I mean, they weren't. I mean, all the same crazy stuff, salacious, bad. It was just all kept, under the covers, behind the scenes, affairs and hedonism and all this stuff happened. It's just that people just didn't talk about it, right? And some of our music was pretty crappy. And I mean, I lived in the '70s, so I mean, a lot of our music
But they played
sucked.
instruments. They
Yeah,
actually wrote lyrics.
there
They.
is that. And I'm sure Bach and Mozart would go, these kids today, the crap they play, so it's all relative. And but that sliding scale is, the idiocracy of time, of history. The world has moved more towards idiocracy over time, to the point where perhaps someday we'll all be like the movie Wall-E, where we're floating around in a lounger with our Slurpee, and we're too fat to get up and fix the ship if it ever breaks.
Yeah.
There is some truth there, but I also don't harbor the idea that um, in the good old days everything was perfect, because it wasn't. And but if we continue doing this, certain things did work though, right? We built the Empire State Building in 18 months. The Empire State Building, beginning to end, took 18 months, right? We can't finish a 2-mile stretch of highway in America in under 5 years, right? If we tried to build the Empire State Building today, I'm sure it would take 10 years to complete, at least 5, right? So there are some practical things that we got to get better at as a society. Maybe AI will save us all and we won't have to do it. We can sip on our Slurpees and float in our floating couches, etc., because AI will do everything for you. I don't know, but we're on the cusp of trying to figure out that at the worst of all possible combinations, you have technology running rampant and developments like AI coming on board at a time when we seem less sociologically able to cope with it.
Yes.
Culturally, the worst time for us to be able to cope with it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ugh, um, damn, it's interesting
So maybe
stuff.
we'll bring on some experts that know more about this than us, and maybe they can solve it for us. But
Yeah,
um, having there's a great middle group in the world that aren't the two tails, that are in America, smart young people like yourselves, that if left to their own devices, if not pitted against each other, if not told they were evil and bad, even bad because you're a young white male and you're toxic, right? If allowed to coexist and to cooperate and work together, I have great faith that America's future could be brighter than any future than any past we've had.
it's it reminds me of a point where when I dropped out of school, because I was making enough money, I went to school for a semester and I dropped out of college, and I was making enough money that school didn't make sense. I was getting a history degree. That's not going to take you very far. And I was invited to join a social club for talented young people run by someone who used to be part of Jake Paul's management. And then I lived in LA for a couple months, moving out. But the thing that shocked me is this was a selection of people from all over the population, people with different backgrounds in business and influencing, and um, who had who had done all sorts of stuff. And none of them are people who I want to lead. Or very few. There's a handful, but vast majority are people I do not want to lead. They're the selection of people who would be created for basically being the new leadership class. They have none of the skills necessary. They know about money. They care about, I said this before, money and sex and entertainment. And what I've found dealing with What If Altist fans, or the people who I collect through watching the show, and the vast majority of my friends are people I've met through What If Altist, is they're much better material. They're people who tend to be more likely to keep their word. They're honest. They're hardworking. They're intelligent. They're nuanced, but they're not getting to that. They're not going to. It doesn't look as if they're going to get power because they're just people living their lives watching a YouTube channel. And the thing I see is this disbalance where the group that is being led to become a ruling class is completely incapable, and it makes me wonder if we'll have some major French Revolution or World War One like event because the old elite is completely incapable. And that's a big reason I'm moving to Texas because I can't take the LA group, which is the coast of the two areas that control the country now.
So I live in a very rural part of Texas, right? And it's interesting. I've run the experiment. I had a motorcycle. I got in a motorcycle wreck not long ago, and about every fifth car stopped to see if I was okay. If they were in a truck, they stopped. If they were on a motorcycle, they stopped, right? I'm sitting there for an hour or so waiting for a tow truck or whatever, right? And 25 to 30 different drivers all stopped and said, "Hey, are you okay?" I would ask the audience, if you live in LA and you pull over by the side of the road, how many might stop and check to see if you're okay, et cetera, right? There is something different culturally, right? And it's good. And when I come over this particular hill, I can see out, and there's land, there's country land, et cetera. There's, I can drive a mile and not see a car, and something happens to you when you're not in those kind of close confines. And you and I are both big fans of this study. This was done, this experiment that was run called Mouse Utopia, right? When you end up in a city like LA or New York and you're shoved that close to each other, or Tokyo or Mexico City or anything like that, I don't think we were designed to live that close together. And I don't think we were designed to live that close together mentally, because we're connected at all times through social media, our phone, et cetera, right? That it's the same thing. You can live in a small town, but it feels like you're living in a big city if you're connected to social media, right? If you can unplug from social media, it's kind of like going out into the country and walking around in the grass and watching the sunset. Um, we're not we're not built as animals. Human beings as an animal, I don't think, are built to be connected this way, et cetera, and to and have our brains, firing synapse all the time. And then if you're bombarded with the kind of somewhat callous, shallow crap that that you're rejecting, right, on social media, at some point you just go, it's too much, and you've decided, I'm out of here. I'm not going to deal with that, et cetera. I'm going to go somewhere where my life maybe moves a little slower, and it doesn't focus on things that are so unimportant. Is that's part of your motivation for
Yes. It
moving?
Yeah, the modern world feels like a train that's trying to go faster and faster while running out of gas. And I grew up in the countryside. I grew up in a pretty rural area of Pennsylvania, and I miss it. I just miss seeing trees, and I'm tired of seeing concrete boxes outside my house. um, so and I don't really see a lot of benefit to cities, if I'm honest. At this point, there's um,
So for all of those people who can't move out into the country, you're going to go somewhere in Austin is the plan, right? And Austin's still a pretty good sized town. It's over 1 million people, right? Um, what do we, I'm going to answer my own question. Young people today have got to figure out a way to disconnect and or get outside, and be in the country, et cetera, be out in nature, or find a way to disconnect so that they're not bombarded 24/7 with just general information, let alone negativity.
I think people just
Uh,
need to practice mindfulness. There's no cost to meditating for half an hour every day. I meditate every day, and it's one of the best things I did. I'm pretty into mysticism, which is something a lot of people don't know about in What If Altist, where I meditate. I was raised a Quaker, which is a sect of Protestantism based off meditating, and I study a lot of like esoteric knowledge. And I think if you can establish that kind of connection to something more powerful or divine outside of your daily life, it can give you some degree of perspective on what is just crap that you don't need. And at this point, I've not using Twitter for a month. I stopped that a couple weeks ago, and I only check Instagram twice a week. And really, what do you get from Instagram or Twitter? Because you're genetically wired to be hacked by these apps. Then you pull off them. What have you achieved from spending that hour on Twitter? But you've gotten a lot angrier.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I'm a much happier person when I don't check social media too much, et cetera, and watch people wrangle and fight, et cetera. And last Friday, Thursday and Friday, I went to a men's retreat, and I've never been terribly either spiritual or religious, in particular religious. Went to a lot of different churches, et cetera. I desperately want to believe in God. I'm one of those people. I've always disliked atheists because they're somewhat
Cringe.
virulent about their disbelief. Agnostics, I could get behind. I don't know. You don't know. I'm not going to kill you over it. Fine. So I've always been a bit of an agnostic, but I've also always been a Christian because if you can't get behind the basic tenets of what Jesus Christ taught, love thy neighbor as thyself, turn the other cheek. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle, all that kind of good stuff. If you can't get behind those principles, and I would argue there are no bad religions, right? There are no bad religions. There are people who practice them badly, right? And it's people who keep saying, well, religion is horrible, and it's more people have died over religious things. No, bastards twisted this stuff. Nothing in the religion. No, there's nothing in Christianity that says go out and kill a bunch of people and take their stuff. I mean, it's not in the book anywhere, right? Nor is it in Buddhism or Confucianism or Hinduism or any of these things, right?
And how many of the standards we hold religions to can humanist ideologies compare to?
How many?
Because
Say that again.
how many of the standards people hold religion to can humanist ideologies hold up to? Because people say,
No,
because most of the time when people are attacking religion, they want to replace it with their own ideology, whether that's some vague form of social democracy, like what Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins like, whether it's
mhm.
communism, whether it's fascism, libertarianism. If you hold the ideology you are propounding, because you cannot have a worldview that exists in a vacuum, if you hold whatever belief you're propounding against a traditional religion, it's not going to hold up. Communism's killed more than every other ideology and religion combined over history. If you're a capitalist, slavery has been driven by capitalism since the dawn of time. That's killed a tremendous amount of people. Or if you say it's all lies, the view you're propounding is probably some form of pseudoscience, where if you try to push a view and say it's scientific, the world is so complicated that the chances that your view is, as a worldview is correct is low. I mean, communism's the best example, where they say their worldview is scientific, but it's failed every single place it's been tried, every continent, every civilization. And even if you say, I believe in equality, which is a pretty standard view today, and it's taboo to go against. Equality is not real. People are born with differing degrees of intelligence, kindness, hard work, etc. So if you say you're believing in equality, you're believing in a pseudoscience.
So all of these things are aspirational, right? Every religion, every philosophy is aspirational, and no one can live up to them. I was a follower of Saul Alinsky. I was a Alinskyite back in the day, you know, trying to practice asymmetric warfare sort of politically back in the day, left versus the right. And rule number 4 of Alinsky's rules for radicals is hold your opponent to their own standard. No one can live up to their own standards. No one can practice the religion fully. People are flawed, right? Um, and so I agree with you 100%. No, there's no religion, there's no philosophy, including communism or whatever, where anyone can live up to it. And as a matter of fact, I really wanted to be embrace socialism and each to his means and each to his ability, each to his needs, this kind of stuff. Share and share alike. I mean, I really wanted that, and I found that a lot of people didn't really want to do that. They kind of wanted to be along for the ride and not really work. And they were takers and they weren't givers, and it fell down. That's because people are inherently flawed, right? We can all agree with that. There are some great people doing great things, and we note heroism and selflessness all the time. We love to point to those examples, et cetera. But as a organism, humans are selfish, self-driven, et cetera. And people have bastardized and abused religions and in the name done horrible things, et cetera. But it's not the religions. And I'm really tired of people saying it's the religions. And I was particularly struck to be in a room full of 5,000 men, right? Who were the antithesis of this toxic masculinity. I am first, this was all I am second kind of stuff. This is serve others, take care of your families, be responsible, etc. And I don't care what religion that is, but I want some of that. Any religion or any movement where men say, there are wolves out there. I need to be a sheepdog. I'm going to take care of others. I'm going to protect others. I'm going to provide for people. I'm going to treat them well, etc. I'm going to be humble over vain. I'm for that. So I was very heartened to go to that thing. And I absolutely agree with you that our country, our people, that humans need to find something outside of themselves, and that spirituality, et cetera. And I'm so glad I've got two boys, and they have found their way much faster than their old man, which is something I want them to have. People who have some deep abiding faith live longer, have happier lives, feel more fulfilled, et cetera, have greater peace. And I'm going to get over my doubting Thomas stuff eventually someday, maybe between now and the day I die. We'll see if it ever happens. But anyway,
I
I'm glad to see that my two sons are that way. And this country, this world needs that. And I'm glad that as a young man, you're largely there, that you've become very spiritual. And the last thing I'll say on this is, I have a science background, I have a geology degree, et cetera. I'm involved in astrophysics and cosmology, helped come up with a particular view of how the universe ends, called the Big Rip. Um, and my view
which
of
is
it
a
is
theory I've
that,
heard of before I met David, which is a credit to David. David, sorry to cut you off, but David invents terms, and so many of them I had heard before I had met him, such as gaydar. Gaydar is an invention of David's,
yeah,
or
yeah,
lean.
being the only straight guy in a bunch of gay bars growing up when I was young, I developed the term gaydar. I claim it. You can claim it if you want, but I've had it since the late '70s. So anyway, it's mine.
Or lean sigma.
Yeah. So I did help create Lean Six Sigma back in the day. But my point is this: almost every one of the major religions, and you pointed this out, has somehow figured out how to intuit the origins of the universe, the Big Bang theory. I mean, Genesis describes it. There are a bunch of these sort of things that somehow simple people without our technology, without our tools, et cetera, through mysticism or whatever, had a sense of their place in the universe. Fundamental notions like the notion of infinity, beginning, end, cycles, this kind of stuff. So there's some value there that we need to understand and utilize, and to think that this is all there is, and that I am the sum total of my production, my how much money I make, my position in life,
Yeah,
and my relative to position to others. Because on a planet with 8 billion people roughly now, there's like one tiny 1% that is living the Kardashian life. A third of them are living on $4 or $5 a day, right? Trying to get fresh water. So somewhere in between, we got to figure out how to be. You got to figure out how to be happy without necessarily being a Kardashian.
yeah, and that's why we get school shooters. That's because America's had guns and lots of it for its whole history, but school shooters are starting in the 70s, and it's people who can't justify their lives.
That is really important. Everyone, okay, this is a bigger question. It's not just that issue. The ability to look at a problem and analyze it, decouple it from certain things, et cetera, and come up with analysis and look at root cause is something that's driven me professionally all my life. I'm big into root cause, et cetera, right? So, what changed between 1870 and 1970 where we started getting school shooters? Was it access to weapons? No. Everybody had a gun, right? And they could have gone into their school and they could have shot everybody, or whatever. They could have gotten on a tower with a high power rifle. They could have done that, but there was something emotionally, societally, sociologically, that changed, that caused people to act out this way. Was it the fact that you got on TV for doing it? Was it notoriety? Was it social media? Was it that thing? Was it access to guns? No, already had guns, so we always had bullets, right? So I really don't think that's the element. It is this disaffection, this feeling of being divorced from society, not having an opportunity, being frustrated, um, feeling as an outsider, minimalized, marginalized. There's a level of frustration that someone used to has to have. Maybe it's from bullying. And by the way, I was bullied very, very heavily. That's why I became a fighter, became a boxer, etc. I never thought about getting a gun and shooting everybody, right? I thought about beating the crap out of the guys that gave me crap, and I did, but I never thought, oh, I'm going to go shoot the school up. So somewhere societally that changed, and it has to do with belonging. Um, and we need to do anything and everything we can to stop bullying from happening. But being ostracized and not feeling part of society and not feeling connected to your to your school, your group, your peer group, et cetera. That's what's causing this. This is clearly a mental health issue, right?
Yes. It's
And that's not something that people believe. And people want simple answers to complex problems. So they say, if I get rid of guns, I'll get rid of this problem.
and it's why movies like Fight Club are so popular, or why Andrew Tate's so popular, or why there's more, or why Taxi Driver is so popular. It's
Falling down. I
I
mean, there's
I'm
there's
very
always been a little bit this, but the degree to which this
yeah.
has happened is historic, and it's caused by something.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself a decently successful guy, and if I'm empathizing with Taxi Driver, so that's not a good sign. Um,
Yeah. All you have to do is spend an hour or so on the phone trying to get technical help with some issue, and your computer won't work, and you can see why. That's an, that's enough to see it. And I tease. Um, so you and I don't have all the answers for all the world's problems. We have some thoughts and some and we observe and we comment on them. We're going to ask other people to come on here and give us their thoughts. The audience, I'm really interested in your audience in particular. I'd love to understand who, and I'd love for them to put in the comments who they think would be a really interesting guest for us to invite on. If they have someone that they know, if they're happy, if they're willing to help us connect, we would be honored and deeply appreciative if someone would make a connection, say, hey, you ought to come on and be interviewed by Common Ground. And we would promise in this game, this has been a form conversation, mostly trying to explain our motivations, why we do this, what this is about, and what people can expect. We'd also like their impressions. We'd like people to comment, right? We want to hear what they want us to talk about. If they think we're completely full of crap, that's okay. The great thing about being 61 is you can't cancel me. I'm retired. No, so you won't hurt my feelings. Go ahead and say what you want to say, right? But it'll be whatever they people comment on in the comment section will be treated with respect, and we'll actually listen to it. And like you did before, you changed your content, you changed your format quite a bit, right?
yeah, I
I'm willing to change our format, our content based on the input that the audience gives us.
that's one of the great things of the internet. People aren't going to lie to you. They'll tell you exactly, because people would always say your mic's terrible, you sound terrible, um, your content sucks. And I took that and I kept changing until people stopped saying that. And that's something where I wish it happened in the rest of your life, because you can go your whole life and people will never tell you what your flaws are.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I absolutely agree with that. Quite often, people are too polite, and they you can't get them to be honest with you, which would be helpful. Now, but because people are keyboard warriors, sometimes they will say stuff that they would never say if someone was directly across the table
You
from them.
need
Because
judgment because,
yeah, some civility is required, right, in life. But and because we don't have that threat of physical violence, right? In Texas they say them's fighting words, right? Because they don't have that threat. Some people will say the most outlandish, cruel, hurtful things in an excessive way, right? And yet, in our personal lives, when someone is in the same room with you, they won't do you the courtesy, the decency of
yeah,
being honest with you.
it's
So,
it's interesting. Where a big reason I haven't used Twitter in several weeks is I ran a couple experiments where I said an incredibly milk toast thing like "I'm feeling happy now," or um, I like, or like I'm reading a book that I like a lot. Things that are normal statements that you should not get judgment. And the interesting thing is, you say something like "I'm feeling happy." you'll get lots of comments like, "There's no chance you're actually happy. You're lying," or you're not married yet. There's no way you can be happy. And I'm thinking, what the hell is your problem? Why are you? And it boils down to a combination of lack of character development and envy, where the reason we cancel celebrities is because we envy them. And whenever I see comments that are clearly, or
Just
one of my enemies,
intentionally contrarian. Everything's just contrarian
yeah,
to be
exactly.
contrarian. Yeah, we see that. I do think there's some therapy. Apparently, being a keyboard warrior or whatever is therapeutic. I know it supposedly releases endorphins into your brain, right?
I doubt that over
Um,
long term, like it improves your
long term, it's
quality of
not
life.
good therapy, right?
No, like,
It'd be better to go punch a bag.
yeah,
You'd
it
feel
makes you
better.
angrier. It gets you in a cycle of rage where you feel good, so you experience more rage. So the neurological parts of your brain associate pleasure with screaming at people.
So the one great thing the Chinese will bring to us when they take over America is that we'll only get 2 hours of social media, and we'll have to earn it by being good and doing something healthy. If you don't work out, you don't get your 2 hours of TikTok. Anyway. Well, I really enjoy visiting with you, and I look forward to having more conversations with you and with others like this. I don't think the other ones will be exactly like this, but I did want to set the stage, make
Yeah,
sure people understand a little bit about you, et cetera. I think you have a great deal of wisdom, and I would like the people that watch your videos. You're going to be doing this a lot longer than me. I would like people to listen to the insights and the sort of causal analysis that you do and try to draw, how does this affect policy? What should we be doing? Clearly we need to do a better job with education. Our education system sucks by any objective measure. Physically we're not healthy, right? And we're now telling people it's okay to be fat, right? um, we don't produce much. Your friend, a young friend, is trying to bring silicon semiconductor chips back to America. We need to do that. We need to have control of rare earth metals. We need to be able to make our own things. We need to be able to have energy independent. We can be as inviting in terms of immigration as we want to be, but we probably ought to have some form of immigration policy, right? Fentanyl is a real thing and it's bad. We probably ought to stop it if we can, right? Sex trafficking is happening and people ignore it, right? La 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 la. And then we end up arguing about whether or not Mulvaney's on the on a Bud Light can. I mean, there are real important problems that we need to address, and we skirt around the edges and don't talk about the important things. So I'm hoping that people will take heart and that they will vote and that they will become active and that they won't just sit watching YouTube videos, that they will get out and be politically active and be focused on principles and policies more so than personalities and politics.
I mean, I
That's my
agree
hope.
with Dave here. You should all be reading Will Durant right now. He is a writer of the 20th century who's one of the most esteemed, and he wrote a 13-volume history of civilization. If you're watching this in high school or college, and you can read two Durant books, you're on the right path. Also, just we all know what the correct path is. We exercise, tell the truth, clean, keep your room clean, and
Read.
just execute that. You know what is good. Just do it.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. It's just hard and not that hard. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed visiting with you. We're probably going to sign off right now. We hope people will come back. We hope that they'll recommend people to be interviewed by us. Hope we like you to introduce us to them, etc. Love to get your comments. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. I don't know how to say all that stuff, but I'm sure you guys are used to that. So please tell your friends about this podcast and, of course, about Why Default History. And if you can, if you're interested in national security issues, advanced technologies, things like AI, space, check out America's Future Series. We're americasfutureseries.com. I hope you guys will come check that stuff out as well.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, and see you next episode.